In this show, we will discuss focusing our creative imagination to meditate on God. Unfortunately, again we discover that words sometimes get in the way of clear communication. There are Christian teachers and Christian groups who have a hard time with the word imagination and point out that the Bible condemns worldly imagination. But worldly imagination is not the same as godly imagination. The Bible condemns the making of graven images, but it does not condemn the use of a godly imagination. The word imagination comes from the word image or symbol. Words are symbols, and no human thought can exist without words. Imagination is one attribute that we share with God, who is able to imagine all kinds of things. And although imagination may be misused, it is nevertheless a powerful tool for God's glory when it is used properly. Let's talk about the difference between idolatry and imagination. Images created by our imagination are, first of all, temporary. They are models of reality and therefore are imperfect, just like everything else we do. They are not to be taken as accurate, but only approximate. Idols are considered permanent and accurate. Images use the senses in creative ways to picture what is difficult to grasp. Idols limit the senses, declaring one particular interpretation to be the only accurate interpretation. Images point us to God and encourage us to think about it. Idols take the place of God, insisting that they are the only true, accurate representations of God and therefore are God. Images encourage us to think deeper. Idols limit thoughts to themselves. We cannot know what God looks like, so we make symbols to represent him. Idols are not symbols. They claim to be godlike themselves. Our imagination creates a sensory picture, using the five senses to imagine God and his goodness. These senses are sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell. We can use imagination exercises as a way of drawing closer to him. Let's look at one imagination exercise that's found in the scripture, Psalm 23. Psalm 23 is one of the most famous passages in the Bible. It begins, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." The scriptures are inviting us to picture ourselves in our imaginations as a sheep, and God in our imaginations as our shepherd. Imagine what your life would be like if you had God as your shepherd and you were the sheep in his good fold. If you were a sheep, what would you see? Maybe you'd see green grass and still waters all around you. What would you hear? The quiet gurgling of the still waters, the wind blowing through the green grasses. It would be music to a sheep's ears. What would you smell? The odor of hay in the fields would be like perfume to you. A good shepherd would keep his sheep nearby where they could smell that green grass and that beautiful water. What would you touch? Under your hooves, you can imagine the touch of soft dirt and green grass between your hooves. What would you taste? You would taste that green grass. It would be a beautiful thing. You would see. What would you see? What would you hear? What would you smell? What would you touch? What would you taste? Now let's take this imagination exercise one more step. You're not a sheep. Nevertheless, you're God's sheep. How does the Lord satisfy you? What do you see that makes you happy? Maybe your family all around you. Maybe nature, the wonders of nature that God has placed you in. What do you hear that makes you happy? The words of love and support of our Christian brothers and sisters. Maybe the words of scriptures saying, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever would believe in him would not perish." What do you smell that makes you happy? A yard full of flowers, perhaps? Biscuits baking in the morning? The realization that God has provided you both beauty and sustenance? What do you touch that brings you joy? The fur of your pet in your hand? The tools in your work, perhaps? What do you taste? What about the food that God provides? All of these things are things that your good shepherd gives you. And the act of translating what a sheep has to what you have, that imagination turns it into a reality in your life. It makes it seem more real. When we really see what God has given us, we can rejoice like a sheep with a wonderful shepherd.